다다진디 가서래 차나 차제세 저거 칭사라 봐 간사되면 풍부할 때는 따바이면 온지 추에 추하면 봐 최점제 시와 차오세 제라 치지로도 추와 배나 3대바 가시기 3대바 가시 터바 현시 그 고라 터바 현시 고라 자로 냠도 추와나 가시기 뒤치지 고래 송오시 터바 현시 규례 안에 또바 라바신도 치지로고 따바신도
So thus, as what we concluded earlier today was that because the person is merely designated in dependence upon the aggregates, it's not established by means of its own intrinsic nature or its own character, and one should understand all phenomena as being just like that. And then the example for that is that where's that 170? Oh. There was a an instance of mistaken and wrong perception is when a practitioner of meditative concentration mistakenly imagines that there to be a skull on the top of his head, and then someone else shows him a skull and says, "This fell from your head," and the idea was disappeared.
Oh yeah, that teacher, that got the shabby. Quite Sunday twenty is a gala. She never toba your bed the jala. Sola you made the other turn on top of one and never switched in the Shevata. Annie, Jeva. She never drew a toba your bocona, your banita, toba member, and the issue of that as you want to show an Ashini, River Trujuaki. And it's them Marie Jane Chung. 我看见作为3节岁退休了几点那么多些姐妹在这个我的马里比见来穷啊是的马里比见来穷啊渐渐是个在这里见穷啊是多马里巴来的呢穷啊印章做我3节岁啊印章两个之间来见了结我印章2万多马猪吧2万多马猪吧印章安尼大把张印吧 他太情况对就3米出名写的，明明人们那些人家成为吃的当，看是，你就看住对不起，养大嘛也吃的哇，提前看你人讲，对起养大你都没意思，他就把出去看是，对了，人家成完天了人，就看住对不起人，看住对完了，在那大娃也没吃的。 안에 라완데 양다바 마주시야 안다마 안다바 마주바 치다와스 다 감주긴 나네 상감다고 코라야 안에 랑그 샤샤 두만 뒤와라다나 소발에 두만 뒤와라다나 다와 인장 감레레야 랑그 샤샤 두만 뒤와라다나 다와 인장 아니 양다바 마인 세가 대신 감리라 레레야 뉘지 양다 니도 민
So thus, here in this, the explanation of this, the meaning of what we find in the root text, as well as in the commentary, that Chandrakirti's commentary on this, is given in a verse out of the 60 verses of reasoning. There it says that the world arises on the condition of ignorance. Here, world can refer to the sentient beings inhabiting the world, or the environmental world as well, arises meaning that here ignorance again is the first factor of dependent origination, the root cause of samsara and the arising of worldly existence. And so where it says here, it arises with the condition of ignorance. That means it arises in dependence upon that condition being in place, the condition of ignorance. And the Buddhas have taught that that is the case. This is, we can explain this also in terms of a verse from the verse which we mentioned, or a verse that was mentioned coming out of the Precious Garland, where Master Nagarjuna has said that the person is not earth, the person is not wind, earth or water, is not wind, is not fire, is not space, is not consciousness. And since the person is not the collection of those elements brought together, then sorry.
Yeah. 감레레랑 상감다고 지보태양 안에 차샤 두만 뒤와라 야 차샤 두만 뒤와라 때는 숭화인자 차샤 두만 뒤와라 때는 따바자면 인디 따바자면 인지 라와도요 말했지 이제 감레랑 레양 뒤지 양단이 두면.
So the person then is not any of those individual elements, is not the collection of the elements, because the person is simply designated based upon the collection of the elements or the collection of the aggregates. The person is not any individual element or any individual aggregate. It is not the collection of the elements or the collection of the aggregates. Rather, it is something that is designated based upon the collection of the aggregates. And when one searches for the person within the aggregates or the elements, one doesn't find the person either within the individual elements or the collections of the elements and the aggregates. The person is not findable within either collection of elements that makes up the basis of designation of a person. So, and then the same analysis can be applied to the individual elements or the individual aggregates themselves. Like, for example, the aggregate of, or the element of water, the element of earth is itself composed of a mass of earth particles, and the individual particles themselves are composed of parts. So there's no single irreducible bit that one can come upon when one proceeds to do an analysis of the elements, and the same thing applies to the aggregates. So that being the case, then the elements themselves or the aggregates themselves, the individual elements or individual aggregates, are themselves dependently designated based upon a collection of parts. And so that applies throughout. Everything exists in that way, dependently designated, and thus the person is not findable within either the collection of the elements or the collection of the aggregates.
다 된대 인자 가서래 치단 난게 간대지 이나야 아니 예수의 가르래 해서나 랑게 다시 초발라 때네 아니 민기파 딱잠도 여봐자 마도 아니 라왕도 랑공을 주와 짱 매바데 아니 수중하고 민잠치 이제 제가 수중하고 민잠치 나가야니 민잠모 주메수다 갈라요 중시 뒤와랑 당 안에 가서래 수분라서 뒤와라 따와자 마도 라신지 좋아요 말이 주메수다 갈라요 대지 민잠이자 메스 민게 따당 코라야 아니 민게 따와자 마도 라완도 좋아해봐 대지 민잠이자 메스 초단 두시당 남시 중화 따부탕 안에 가서 다시 주니 삼바차서 초당 두시다 두시 남시 중화 나시 중화 초발할 때나 따바자마도 랑을 아니 배 라완도 매봐 어떠나 예수의 가르에서 랑게 다시 초발할 때네 다시를 때네 민게 따sam도 여바마도 아니 라완도 주바지 여바 말이 전에 다 됐은 건 버려
So there's likewise a verse from the Precious Garland again, which expresses the same point. And there it's saying that if we look at the aggregates themselves, well, first of all, the person is designated based upon the collection of the aggregates. That is, the person or I or self is not the collection of the aggregates, but it is a name which is applied or ascribed to the collection of the aggregates, used to identify the collection of the aggregates. But if we look at the basis of designation there, that is that which is designated as a person or an I or self, then the basis of designation itself is not something that exists in its own right. Rather, this is a collection of things also. For example, with the case of the 5 aggregates, the aggregate of physicality, the body, that is, where the body itself, or the physical aggregate, is a collection of composed of the elements, physical elements of earth, water, fire, wind, space. These things have to come together in order to form a body, or any other instance of anything that we find within the physical aggregate. So the physical aggregate, or the body, or even external bodies, are all the same way. They don't. It doesn't exist in its own right. It's a mere name, something that we use the name, the physical aggregate, to identify something that itself is a collection. So in that case as well, the basis of designation, the physical aggregate, and the name that we give to it, physical aggregate or form aggregate, sometimes people translate that, or the body, we could say, is itself something that is simply a collection which is designated, upon which a name is given. The same thing applies to the rest of the 5 aggregates, the aggregate of sensation, aggregate of ideation, aggregate of activities, the aggregate of consciousnesses. All of those things are collections, and we ascribe those names. So they're reducible to mere names when we investigate what is an aggregate. It's a name, a mere name. And so just in the way that I or self or a person is a name that is used to a mere name, which is designated based upon a valid basis, a collection of something that is suitable to be named, given that name. Then the same thing applies to the basis of designation itself. When we do an analysis of the basis of designation in any case, whether one's talking about internal phenomena or external phenomena, the basis of designation itself is a mere name, and reducible to other parts which are themselves merely nominally designated.
Oh yeah, that is the chim chawache. Namdo she. 这位天来把空头去把来写把查我说今天马上见见都说多把大咱们每个大把咱们这样大把嘛住吧咋提起但这些啦你们报名的主席干巴的啦干那样干的看到天气都经把写在原名的现在天气经把那查我这把马印后是看的安尼要我当平面判定这个这有件的差别天气经白安尼看说平面没多少差把报名的说那么啦差把报名的说那么啦
So then the end of that that verse from the 60 verses on reasoning says, therefore, in what way is it not acceptable or demonstrable to say that this world is thought? It's merely a thought construct. On all the parts and things that exist within it are mere thought constructs. And so by understanding that verse properly, the meaning of it, then one should come to understand the way in which things, all internal and external phenomena are mere thought constructs, merely, or looking at it from the point of view of designation, they're merely designated in dependence upon their bases of designation. Then the next point is that a rejection of supposed proof that one is unable to get rid of the mental afflictions, and that comes in verse 179, and there it says, someone might say, since men men and women are bound together by mutual desire, one cannot give up women, and thus one cannot give up desire. The answer to that is none, as it were, are bound to one another. It is unfeasible to separate that which is bound together.
Oh yeah, that dela. Galang Kanda and you do Jimba Shisha Yemin de Siga, Jawaka, Ju Aneka Sukala and Galayang, Ju Gashila, Jawa Sukala Yang, Pimedang, Pimekanda, and you do only Jimba Shisha de Jimba de Rashi to be Jimba your Maris. Only Jimba Marashi to be Jimba Yena, and it to Tamjadu, and a pension, and a Shabbat Jimba Yoko. Only Jimba Meba Yizang, and a Lamshi, and a Tela Casore, Chaba, Mawa, Chaba Meba, and a young Yonsigre said that Java Kala Yang Pimeda, Henji to only Jimba Sheba Meiji, Rashin Dela Doba Mebe, Rashila. Hadu Yina Jimba de la Doba Mebe, Moniji, Shanda Henji to Jimba la Chawa Riba Mains. Chawa Riba Maindi, Cha Miriba la Chawa Tong, etc. Cha Miribala, Chawa Tonga Yija, Monji Jimba Maris.
So then the response to that is that there's no man whatsoever, or no male person whatsoever, and who is intrinsically, absolutely by their intrinsic nature, bound together with any woman whatsoever. Such kind of a binding together of two persons it doesn't exist, because if they were bound together intrinsically by some kind of intrinsic nature, then it would be impossible for them to ever be separated, the desire to ever disappear that binds them together. And it's incorrect to say that there's anything at all which is intrinsically, by its very nature or intrinsic character, bound together with another, and that applies to persons as well. So if they were bound together in that intrinsic way, then it would be impossible, or we'd never see cases of people being separated from one another, and we do see these cases of people who are bound together by desire separating from one another.
Oh yeah. Bena Lambo Nabota Kabong Onji Chimba Miang. Lambo Zan Labong Onji Chimba Miang. Yashinda Chitala Soya Chimba Shindu. Yuda Ambo, Yajila Chitala Soya Chimba Tishindu. Anita, Yuda Ambo Yasiba Chimba,
The example analogy that's given for this is, though a black and a white ox are not intrinsically bound together, they are bound by means of a yoke and harness. Similarly, craving binds objects and their sense faculties together.
Oh yeah, that day Saba bomb in the Junjan Kabate, then Jimbati. That day, Nimo Mabamba Tomato Mebani. That day, Sona Chungu Chudela, Tezon Saura Minjude. Tezon Sawa Tamija, Siba Super Chava Juru, said they. Then Nimo Mabama Tomami, Tonja Gama, but the day about it. Kadi Teta number Jebe Nimon Donna, and it give party Nimon Mabamba Tatna Jena, Condu number Jebe, Samitala number Jebe, Nimon Batona, and it give party Sheba, Nimon Mabamba Tatnana. Nana say, oh, Annie, Nashena, Statella Lena, Samichela, Lapa Mewata, Travis. Samotoma Nugutana, Rang Mewata Travis. Or tender Mewata Travis, Junzan Tena, and it's on a chungi, Tomba Tenju, the Tenju Tombi Tela, Tenju Rashi, Don Shindu, Chashi Tamja Tabi, Dembanichi, Luruji Sheba Dila. Rashi Don Shindu, Julia Debu Junam, Medunia, the Tobasanga, Teta Yinam, Yende Teta Minam, that to Teson Sawayam, Minjuve. Or tender with Tetum and Misawe, Casa Della, Yum Bobby, Nega Yum Baba, Tabakala Topte, Togumare.
So the next point is, someone might say that, we see lots of people for whom they haven't gotten rid of their mental afflictions, so that appears to be a contradiction, but that's not. There's no contradiction in that. And then this is given in in verse 180, where it says, that those with little merit do not even doubt this teaching. Entertaining just a doubt tears to tatters worldly existence. And so here someone might say, that sort of analysis, investigation of things, here investigation of things means analyzing the ultimate final nature of things, ascertaining their emptiness. If that is able to give rise to the stoppage of the mental afflictions, well, we don't see that happening very much. It appears that most people that we encounter have not gotten rid of their mental afflictions. And why is that? Then the reason for that is that they don't have, because these people are devoid of, or don't have any special interest in the profound dharma. Profound dharma here refers to the teaching on emptiness, because of their lack of excessive or strong interest in this profound dharma, teaching on emptiness. Therefore, these people with little merit, for people with little merit that don't have any merit at all, or have very, very little merit, then they're not going to ever even entertain a doubt about this profound teaching of emptiness as it's held by the Master Nagarjuna. This is the teaching dharma of the two realities, in which, as Master Nagarjuna says, one understands that dependent origination has the sense of being devoid of being established by intrinsic nature, and vice versa. That is, emptiness entails dependent origination, and dependent origination entails emptiness. And that within that, even while dependent origination is devoid of being established by intrinsic nature, it nevertheless, functionality, the relationship between causes and agents and actions and so forth are all demonstrable. This is the view of Master Nagarjuna. And for people of very little merit, they won't even entertain the doubt that, well, is that the way it is or not? They won't even have that kind of doubt about it. And so therefore, how could they possibly achieve liberation, which is the abandonment of the mental afflictions?
Oh, yeah. 대체 소는 중국 최대라 대존 사와 민주래 세. 다 동반이 때마나 아니 가서를 동반이 매박할라는 다 아니 풍화 쳐봐 이 말을. 라 동반이 때마나 동반이 매박다나니 아니 풍화 쳐봐. 동반이라 따니나 셔럽 추나 풍화줄. 지다 주라 손도다 링아니와 주와 신스 자와 셔럽 소만에 매박다나니 아니 풍화주와. 다 매번마다 봐 동반이 때마나 처음에 하시지 주고 동반이 때마나 아니 지다 동반이 이남 여담 매나냠도 디 동반이 이남 마이냠 여담 매냐도 아니 태좀 사나 태좀 사와 잠시장 아니 스바 코라 내가 쳐봐 스바 수를 쳐봐 주대 세가 태좀 사와 잠시장 스바 수를 쳐봐 주대 내루지 된 이지 내루지 된 이지 유도 주사 차겠지 동반이 된 아니 랑그 semla 가서 주사 아니 랑그 유도 쳐봐 잠로 당와 인자是吧 내루지 된 이지 유도 주사지 차겠지로 태선 사와보 내가 태선 사와라 때는 가서래 내게 텐드냐 와라 아니 봐 텐드냐 와라 태선 산에 아니 텐드냐 와라 주어 인상 对吧？对，这么来讲就记住三句话，康熙记，我在国的天嘛说，这么来讲三句话是，这么3年，俺那什么当把你给听了，俺那让个结巴修人，俺那什么结当把你给听，让个大把用过话一张，这么啥话，我团队热心，杨大别大话，努力经验话钱呢，团队年，俺那当把你，俺弄到这边给俺话钱话了，但呢，你们3年，俺那他把就个人是。康熙几点前对你这么来讲就起了，是我的人吧的。
So then, when one it teaches emptiness, when one teaches that, what's important is that the person not fall into the erroneous idea that emptiness means that things don't exist, that things are completely non-existent. If they have that kind of notion when emptiness is explained, then they fall into a nihilistic kind of view, and they'll horrible results will come out of that. This is given the explanation of this is given in the basic verses on wisdom by Master Nagarjuna, where he says that if you misapprehend emptiness, somebody who grasps it wrongly, then they'll be ruined. They'll be completely ruined. And misapprehending emptiness here refers to holding it as entailing non-existence, thinking that if things are empty, then they don't exist any way whatsoever. There's no functionality of things, no causality, no operation of agents and actions, that sort of thing. And so if one grasps emptiness wrongly like that, then the example that's given is just like someone who grasps a snake wrongly. If they grab it by the wrong part, they'll get bitten. Or if one recites a spell in a wrong fashion, it'll rebound against one and harm one. So emptiness taught in that way would result in the same thing. But here it's referring to someone who hears emptiness and they come to think, well, maybe is that the case? Is that the way it is or not? Is it the case that things are empty or are they not empty? They develop that kind of uncertainty about it, but an uncertainty that leads them into wanting to investigate it further. And so having that doubt about it it's said it causes existence to become frayed. The samsara becomes sort of like worn out, so that it's weakened. The force of it is weakened even by simply entertaining that kind of doubt. The reason for that is that because one's the objects, the sort of one's idea about the nature of things has become you've developed a certain amount of interest in the way in which things actually exist, and by investigating emptiness, that's started to become a sort of object of your understanding. So once one develops that sort of striving to develop certainty out of that doubt, a person who's first of all entertained doubt about emptiness, then strives to attain certainty about it. Then once they've gone further than that and developed a firm ascertainment of emptiness by means of authoritative scripture and as well as reasoning, and arrived at the right view from that, then they'll be able to achieve the liberation, which is the total extinction of all of the mental afflictions.
Oh yeah, that is better lah. But not to be any smoke song teas. Any soldiers of Madashi, Mewa tongue, and tell a tesum sana. Any soldiers chin, very chimbe. Daijao, Balakata Tene. 아니 심미지 발라타 스몰라 타신 자주 바로도 침바시노.
The example that's give analogy for this is there was a ship captain who was captured by an ogress who told him not to look toward the south, but he had doubt about her and he was feeling suspicious, so he went that way, and that way he met the king of horses, Balhaka, and escaped from the ogress and crossed the ocean.
Oh yeah, then the jan tabatan toba la ne lu ji teng wa to go wa ta ji den ba te che ra oh tabata la ne lu ji teng wa to go ba den do se dan ni wa ni mo bon zhe jia wa xia ba de la 안 도반지테 도바 담바 타와 텐도냐와 내루텐을 찌비르바 니몽냐와 세니와 담바 제가나 다 담보 완전 담바 세가다 가르고 어디를 저를 쳐서 주고 있잖아 자주 자고 지장오다
Gachik. Jaduk.
애들 넣어서 남바 테나 어떻게 제가 나이 나네 담보 내루지 테나 그거를 샤와 담바 테라양 tendoba chawa telayang nga chene neluji tenla kuwa chawa tang tawa toba kuwa damba damba tsu chuba ranjur kuwa chuba ta neluji tenla kuwa chawa damba tela chukan shinla tuba yi tabi tendo pewa yi sunde kangla kuwa meba teni sawar londe mi ode sundu 강라 퇴좀세 시바시부를 주와게 안에 사무 동반이라와 강라 퇴좀세 시바시부를 주와 동반이지 된 최강신 옷음도 또바탕 기신비 또는 옷음도 배 샤랍지 신비 진바라 소와 지소라 투바이 안에 통랑까지 담보내 손데 사 담보내 손데 최강신라 투바이 타빌란도 페와 예세가나 사탐보네 지시 타비 파도 안에 명량바 페와니 다 그때 사탐보 맞아와체 오라라니 투바라랑 그 통놈같이 탐보네 손데 안에 지시 타비 파도 명량신 페와 숨비 최동반이지 된데 다 토발 제박이 동반이지 되는데 쭉 가라 그와 매바 되네 된데 동반이기 되는데라 쭉 가시 그와 매바 되니 안에 싸워 로단데마 말에 싫어다데마 말에 싫어다데마 많이지 된다 위쪽 되니 희들려마 담바 임배 아니 개와 남지 동반이지 따라 그와 샤바 차오 세가라 표원이 순대 가라 그 매바 되니 싸워 론데 민
So, to the last bit to finish that, this shows this explanation of the previous verse shows that just merely to obtain liberation as well, one necessarily has to ascertain and understand definitively the meaning of the real way things are, understand emptiness properly. This leads into the next topic, an extensive explanation of the way in which one gets rid of the mental afflictions. There's multiple subdivisions of this. We'll skip the outline here and go to the first topic, which is an instruction that one ought to have respect for the meaning of the way things are. This instruction on emptiness, and that's given in verse 181. The subduer, the Muni or sage said of this teaching, there will be increase until liberation. Anyone who lacks interest in it clearly has no sense. So it says the Muni said that sage said that from the first moment of the path of seeing until liberation there will be no decline. What that refers to is from the moment one achieves the path of seeing, regardless of which of the three vehicles one is following, whether it's the Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha or Mahayana, it doesn't matter. From that there will be no decline, only increase in the direct perception of emptiness, concerning which even a doubt tears worldly existence to tatters. The practice of giving and so forth, conjoined with it, will also only increase. This means that when one is following the Bodhisattva path, the Mahayana, then if one's understanding of emptiness is governed by, is conjoined with the the practice of generosity and so forth, then those two will only increase. That means from the point of the path of seeing onwards, once one achieves that, then these will increase. Anyone who lacks interest in the meaning of emptiness clearly has no sense and shows how very foolish he or she is.
Oh, yeah. That did I consider to a chow. No, but then by Kawan, you don't but them like Kawacho. Jidem be sure namni, Jidem be sure nam, Jidem be sure, Gawan namni, Gawala Jana. And then, Oya Masena, Ranganami Chune, and Saber to good hairs. Tony Dobe, Annie, me said to that you can. Tony Dobe said, Tony Dobe share Ji so down. Annie Namjig on the Chiba. Oh, Caso, Sida Longa Sogun Delado, Mindangi, which you could never you the Chiba Tishin Dian, said Midland Dembe, Kiwchiki, Longi Sogun, and they can't be led to Jimanashi Chani. Oh, and it only to be share of Tigi, and it is on Haman Namje Topchiki, and I can't Namjig transit to Chiba. Not to develop Tenashi or what Mino Mibume about Chavacha, Lam is a transit you Bacalajo. Sierra Meba, Mime Paro Chingami, Mibume Bachanju, the Riba, he said that Jibach Gang Body.
So then the end of that last section was just as it shows how extremely foolish one is if one doesn't have the great respect for the meaning of emptiness. And if one has no respect for it, then it shows how foolish one is, and thus likewise those who are wise always have great respect for understanding emptiness, for seeing emptiness properly. And then the next point is that the worldly practices, worldly dharma of the world, these practices come to an end once they have yielded their fruit, but the understanding of emptiness leads to the practices of giving and so forth, to the city of an omniscience. So this is referring to, just as it says also in the verse summary of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, there are verses there which say that just as a single-sighted person, a person who is able to see, is able to lead hundreds or thousands of blind people to a city to escape a great forest of desolation, then just like that, the eye of wisdom, a person who has the understanding of emptiness and then is able to join that together with the practices of bodhisattva practices of charity and so forth, generosity, the other five perfections, then they're able to lead them to the city of omniscience, achieve the state of Buddhahood. So the blind person is analogous to the practices of generosity and so forth, in which one doesn't have an understanding of the emptiness of them. And whereas if you have an understanding of emptiness, then you're able to make the other practices of the bodhisattva path effective in leading and enabling you to lead yourself and others to the state of omniscience.
Oh, yeah, that.
Example that's given here, the contemplation of emptiness is like sugar candy. It should always be savored.
Oh, yeah, that is it. Oh, Council, Taba, that don't you know what don't go back to my. And you Council, Tella, don't you talk about Tamba Tella, Danny Yang and Dajusin. Don't me don't that Tommy Day. Lord Yang and Medawa, Tisha Wana Sumo, say, oh, Tella. And the carton over them, Middle Shindu, Chabata Travis. Chabata Chava Chavich, Tombany Gomba Yinam. And the Russian dream, Medon Shindu, Chabata Travis, Tombany Gomba Yinam. Then but Triva Tomba Le, and 대다 따와라 치다이 따와라 이세나 따바 주에 똥바라 따와라 때네 아니 잡아 잡아래 자 잡아대라.
So the next point is showing that in order to achieve liberation, one necessarily needs to understand emptiness. And this is given in verse 182. One does not regard that which is not empty as empty, thinking thereby to gain nirvana. The Tathagatas say that nirvana will not be attained through wrong views. So here, someone might ask a question, is it the case that things, even though they're not empty, in order to free oneself from attachment, one should meditate upon them as empty, as being empty, having as their nature emptiness, being devoid of intrinsic nature? Or is it the case that that because they are actually empty of being established as real, they're not, because they're really empty, that one should view them that way? That's the question that someone might pose.
Oh yeah, Rashi 주의 동바하라 동바 또냐 공부 쳐봐 인데 가사다 풍부 된동도 마도바 아니 덴바라 셴네 가사다 풍부 덴바라 마도와 덴 아니 덴바라 셴네 나니 또니 공배 양아래 대와 주시我东巴没把那通啊的通明的，这个当年两岸大学就东没东的通明的，是这样子。
So then, no, the answer to that is that one necessarily has to meditate by understanding that which is empty is as being empty, is empty. If you don't understand that the person and the aggregates are devoid of being real, and you instead misapprehend them as being real, then you'll think, by meditating on emptiness, am going to achieve nirvana. You'll think that, but that sort of thought is seeing something as being empty. So in that case, one is looking at things which are not empty as if they were empty. That is, one is misconceiving things to be empty when one is actually
안에 동바따라 통화 말에 세랑시 동바 많이 봐 동바따 통화 말에 내를 전에 치로도 쉬비 로대 양아래 민다와 아니 로바송와 아니 양아래 통화대와 통민이 봐 아니 지식 송바래.
So the person in that case, because they don't understand emptiness correctly, they're seeing things, they think they're seeing things as empty, but they're not. They're seeing things as not being empty, and someone who has that kind of wrong, which apprehends things in a perverse fashion, the nature of the way things are in a perverse fashion, is not going to achieve nirvana. That's what the Tathagatas say.
아니 년대지 살라라바 되베 셔러지 바로를 치마라 라바 차오 세가라 년대지 람람네 타바 된게지 이나야 아니 사모 동반이라 라고 그래 세와 이자 사모 동반이지 람디 매발라 아니 잠시 심보 가야 토면요와 간지 롱라 람디네 매바 장주 매바송 전주 가수야 매바송 세기 너데 가르래서 년대지 살라라바 되베 셔러지 바로를 치마라 라바 차오 사다디 말 년대지 살라라바 되베 셔러지 바로를 치마라 라바 차오 당부 마소 간지 롱라 람디네 매바 장주 매바송
장주 매바
간지를 준장 관계치 셔러지 바로 치미 흉게 가수 lungle lamdi meba sayagala satonyi tobi sherab samotomba니 ngosum to 지남도 돈이 되게 람디 매배 아니 장주서버 가루 토바 믿어봐 강지 룸레 람데데 매바 장주 매바 송
So this point here is that it doesn't matter which of the vehicles one is following, even if one is following the Shravaka vehicle, the vehicle of the disciples, so-called, then one necessarily has to understand emptiness. This is expressed in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras themselves, where it is said that anyone who doesn't have this path, and the path here is referring to the perfection of wisdom, the correct understanding of emptiness, then they're not able to achieve liberation through any of the three kinds of vehicles. They're not able to achieve the great awakening that comes out of following any of the three vehicles.
Oh yeah. 다 되는 가서 디시셔 송오세 되베 최담년이 동반이들 하시면 비수치소 세라 아니 시에숨 바다로 양대숨 강도 주지 단정할 때 다지셔야 되리 저 양대숨 무슨 년주지 년대 란자진한테 특징진 양대숨 뭐 강도 지자 동반이들라 켜와 샤고 와데 같이 룰레 남데네 매바 찬주 매바 송세다 데이터다 임바자 저 켜와 차오 배나 참목 기주 동자 마인바라 나바 차오 나바 신어서 동아 차와 마인바 나 나바 신어서
So then the teacher, the Buddha, has said all phenomena are empty, are characterized by emptiness by means of this way of being devoid of intrinsic nature. The Buddha taught that. And so that shows likewise that regardless of, in order to enter into any of the three forms of nirvana, the nirvana that's achieved through the vehicle of the disciples, the nirvana which is achieved through the vehicle of the Pratyeka Buddhas, individual realizing beings, or the nirvana which is achieved through the Mahayana by bodhisattvas, Buddhahood, then one necessarily has to become skilled in the meaning of emptiness. And the example that's given for this is it's like a novice monk sent to fetch a prohibited drink at night.
No, yeah. Very simple. No, yeah. That is that call and dobby a top down batella. Call and dobby top down batella. Kala Chidan Dan Chunwa. Tell a Juba Sumba Day. Kala Tandam Ne Chunwa. Tell and Doba Sumba Day. Say, oh, the Kala Chidan Sumba Day. Chidan Dan Chunwa. Tell a Juba Sumba Day. The call Jubi Rabasu said. Kademo and a Rashi Tribe Tomba Yina. 태권한이 때 레지 아니 태권한이 때 라시도 배동반이 때 레지 semjen다 뉴지 지된지 주바 때문에继续参加서 뉴지 지된 대다 때문에继续参加나 대기 주바티체 와 되니 지된 주주 마단 바라是吧지된 주주 마단 바 동반이 또 미니베 뉴지 그때 리 가서를 림바 추주되다 지den지 주주 마덴바 동반이 또 미니베 대권한이 또베 탑수 아니 내와를 아니 다 가서를 군족은 앞샷다 땡고레스 지된 주바다 도발라서 군족은 앞샷다 땡고그레스 와 수럽 칸라야 수럽 칸레 오 대바 시험비고 거네 아니 수락 강래 오 담바 오버는 담바 셈비고 과당 디메당 미듬빌 줄에 껴와 가비 텐도 아니 가르서네 디메당 미듬빌 껴라잖아 디메레 껴와당 아니 미듬빌 줄에 껴와대다 가비 텐도 아니 말이 붙인지 두제라 써와스 말이 발라드네 이거 두제길래 좀와당 두제라 써봐 아니 심지어 그 이제 지된 담바 중화 대래 아니 코아지 왜 좀 봤음 바래서 그봐 말비산을 내사 내가왕 아니다 남시 마한테 코아지 왜 좀 봐.
So then next comes the exposition of the method by which one can stop samsara or turn away from samsara, stop samsara from operating, and that's given in verse 183. where it says, first it says one might pose a question. If things are empty of intrinsic nature, intrinsic existence, it is appropriate to teach reality. What is the use of teaching how the world of sentient beings and environments come into existence? Or one can translate that also as develop, the development of sentient beings and environments. And the reply to that is that emptiness cannot be understood without an explanation of how the world comes into being, how it develops. Therefore, explaining it is essential as a means for understanding reality. And then the verse here, 183, says, whatever contains teaching about the world, speaks of, she has engagement here, but I think that's better development. Whatever contains elucidation of the ultimate, speaks of disengagement, turning away from the world, the stoppage of the world process. So here, without teaching the way in which the world develops, the world of sentient beings and the environmental world, how that comes into being and develops, then one's unable to understand emptiness. That cannot be taught. So therefore, it's the teaching on the development of the world is definitely a method for understanding reality, even ultimate reality, emptiness itself. Here it says that as the scriptures, we find in the scriptures that statements such as based upon, due to the factor of ignorance, activities occur. And these teachings are taught, these are like the first two factors of dependent origination. Ignorance serves as a condition for the arising of activity, the activity of karma, and the rest of the factors of dependent origination. So these are taught for the purpose of negating misconceptions that things occur without any cause whatsoever, or that they arise out of some kind of cause which is not concordant, is incompatible with the way in which they actually exist. And people posit those notions of the world arising causelessly or out of causes that are not compatible with the way things actually are, out of their attachment to things being real, grasping or craving and misapprehending functional things as being real. So therefore, it's through this teaching on the way in which the world of sentient beings and the environment arises that out of that, the Buddhas teach the stages of the development of samsara, how samsara arises.
Maribi Tujana Dene, Ane Niwa Tujagas and a quadruple Himbasamni, Ane Dudengi Messiah de Rava, Dudensa Mikona, Koala, Shallow, Namaji, Main Magena, Tabatani, Tixam the Jew, Sayanashi Chani, or Denashi Chani, Tenita, you Maribala Dene, Ane Dujiga Pumbo Trumni. Ane Duajira Tashina Shishani, Jaganashi, Naji Duala Sawaki, Ane Kasore. Dungaji Nazu Sambe, Quajim Ribada Sambe, and it take her, you were in body. Now, Dunga Medina, Koala Dogore, Dobala, and a Doba Cheva, Catatonia Muslim Towachiko, Tenantavatowachigo in town, and they tell her. Remember somebody, Tendavati, Queen Misawadi, and a tenant of a Tavre, said, turned about top in the soul.
So, thus, these first two factors of dependent origination, that ignorance serves as the condition for the activity of karma, and then it says, etc., that shows that out of the activity of karma then arises a name and form and so forth, and all of the other factors that proceed out of from ignorance proceeds the activity of karma, and then the whole process of development culminating in aging, death, and so forth. All of that arises out of ignorance. So that teaching is given in order to engender within the disciples an understanding of suffering, how suffering is, suffering itself, and also the causality of suffering, how suffering arises from specific causes and conditions. So it's only by understanding of that a person can develop the wish to become free from the condition of suffering and to develop the desire which will impel one to strive for the achievement of liberation from suffering. And so that is taught in that way. And then and so this sequence by which samsara develops, how it originates, and the process of how it proceeds in a sort of developmental process is taught in that way. And all of that is given first of all to develop a desire to achieve liberation, but then the causality aspect of it is also shown as a method, as a method for enabling a person to gain understanding of the ultimate reality as well. Ultimate reality here being emptiness.
Oh yeah, 대다 아니 과주비 뭐 삼네 아니 거의 이미 세네 아니 탑에 대화라 이층 보면 더바게 가사 되라 강래 아니 대한다 뭐 최랑신지 주부 동바 타바 톱지가 아니 토바게 키 아니 마리바 방고와 마리바 본지기 님뭐 라신지 주바 동베동 아니 라신지 주바 아니 동바도베 로티기 아니 방고와 연장 녀라 라신지 동바 때라 방고와 연장 칸라团다바 최 라신지 주에 녀바 총 때바 총아 시기르와 칸라团담 녀총와 대라 도바 숨바오 세가라 라신지 주바 때바래 아니 때바 다르티 라신지 주바 때라 팝 마주바 때라 팝 아니 라신지 마주바 도베 돈이 도베 로 콩바래 아니 코알라 도베 름바테다 아니 총아인장 콩 도베 름바 숨바오
So that's once one understands how samsara develops, how out of ignorance arises the activity of karma, and then all of the other factors of dependent origination, that teaching on the development of the world, that will then, of the world of samsara, then that will engender within a person, once they understand that properly, a desire to achieve freedom from that, liberation, because they recognize the negative consequences of being in a condition of samsara, and that then engenders that desire for freedom, for liberation from that kind of state. And then once that has been developed, then they'll also want to know how it is that they can become free. What is the method that will enable me to become free from samsara? And then once they're seeking that out, then they're in a position to be receptive to gaining the instruction on the ultimate. Ultimate here means the things being empty of being established by their own intrinsic nature, that all phenomena are devoid of being established by their own intrinsic nature or intrinsic character. And so then that method is taught, the explanation of the ultimate, and that's the sequence by gaining an understanding of that teaching. First of all, you have to establish emptiness correctly by reasoning, and then once one gains that understanding of it, then one can proceed to engage in the process of reversing samsara, turning away from it. The ultimate is the method, or the teaching on emptiness is the method by which samsara is, the process of samsara is reversed so that it comes to a cessation eventually, and finally comes to a total cessation.
Oh yeah, that's 배나 띵고도 주바나 차진지 주바 준서여바 도와 차와 신호 세다 그러나 야.
So the example that's given here is that when you're entering into a hole, you cast away all of the implements the equipment that you're carrying around with you.
Oh yeah, that 되게 대체 다 시와 돈이라 잡아 방와데 와 콜라도베 탑된 바디체 다 사무 돈만이 땡주 잡아 아니 최담자 라시지 주바 까도 잡아 아니 가서래 라시지 마주나 아니 가서 타냐던도야 매봐 인직 다 차지라 소와 까야기 아니 지바제데 다디 숨고요 말이 그 마이 지샤시 철란 지바제 주창 가대 자와 연하니 최대도 하자 민주시에서 가정하고 탐제 아니 아시지 동바 이나 아니 자제 탐제라 다 구웠다와 구웠다바 임베 타바야 매버 주비치리 미데바 토마시도 주로서 다 오버모 매제 되다라와 오버모 매제기 라신지 존나 아니 다 자제 탐제 미다바 예 수완나 시체네로와 자세를 가서서 가르치다 군도나 중앙 매체 집함에 파배된바 시원나 철라매바 타와 줄선에다 로와 가르치다 군도나 제 치단한 거 온디 탐제 라시지 집에 동와지이나 아니 줄에되는 저 중앙요 말이지 중앙 매체 아니 가봐야 요 말이지 아니 되면은 아니 가서를 주군중을 되는 저 동화 중앙당 아니 그 아니 가서 남들라 때는 군중 가대 아니 저거 고단 토바라서 연구 말에 전에다 된 나시 전에다 대 주바송아 임바래라 유르시나
Next comes the point of why one should get rid of fear, one's terror towards emptiness. Here, people think emptiness means total non-existence. They misunderstand it as meaning that things don't exist even conventionally. They think if things are empty, if everything is empty, then there's no cause, there's no effect, there's no agents, there's no actions, that all of these everything becomes non-existent, and they fall into a nihilistic view when they hear about emptiness. Some do, and so here there's a dispelling the terror that some people feel towards emptiness. And the verse here, 184, says, thinking nothing exists, what is the use? You may be afraid, but if actions did exist, this teaching would not be a prevention. Is what it says. So here it says, if someone thinks everything is non-existent, what's the point? And if one gives rise to that kind of terror, and you think that if these things exist, if things do exist, then this dharma, this teaching on emptiness, would not function as something that would eliminate it, would remove it. So someone might say, if all things are empty, then action, karma, and so forth, as well as the object activities, the agents of action, all of these things are annihilated or are disparaged or underestimated, then liberation itself would become totally non-existent, and all kinds of unacceptable things would occur as a result of that. This point, which is being posited by the opponent here, or the questioner, is exactly what we find in the basic verses on wisdom by Master Nagarjuna, where he presents the opponent's position as saying, if all of this is empty, then the origin of suffering, the suffering would not exist, origin of suffering would not exist, the cessation of suffering would not exist, there would be no path to the cessation of suffering. All of these things would become totally non-existent, and again, that's because of misconstruing what the meaning of emptiness is. Person doesn't understand that. And so the opponent might say, if things are
아니 지바게와 주와 차나 주 아니 가대 된다마 차와 연하니 또바니 체제 또바라 콜라 또바 체바 니바 민주대에서 된다마 연하 아니 동반이 시시 동반라 코나 동반 친구와 민주로데스 전담바 주와라 자체 미대배 수장 동민이 위치로서요 자체 미대배에서 대 수장 동민이 위치로
So then the person might say, well, if things are empty of being established by means of their own intrinsic nature, then all functional things would be totally non-existent. And then what's the purpose of making effort to strive for liberation? Somebody thinks that, and such a person, out of their terror towards emptiness, they give rise to that kind of fear that can occur, but that's not valid. If things were ultimately existent, then meaning that if they existed ultimately in some absolute sense, then this understanding of this dharma of emptiness would not be able to serve as an antidote or something that would be able to stop the operation of samsara, and because if something is ultimately existent, ultimately established, agents and actions would be completely irrational or undemonstrable, and no one would be able to eliminate them in any would be able to eliminate them, meaning that the operation of samsara could not be averted in any way whatsoever if it was ultimately existent.
어제 다들이 풍부 대바 샤바니 풍부란 대바 마주발라 대바 샤바니 아니 미줄 추샤바나 시레
So the example that's given here is someone who grasps at the aggregates as being real, who is clinging to them as being real, is similar to somebody who's trying to drink water out of a mirage.
ranjola laba chaba mo shema pongwa tela chola ranjo cha yejin genji chola mekana janjola meka wa tangna ane nyangan dewa mejuji niji shiwar minjuro niji shiwar ye mechuro se da tela kade tongba kade kowa doje tongba niji choni chodo juwa yin la se chodo juwa yin la 先亲戚老爷呢些，俺那让着了喇叭恰行，俺那先着了些单位没去了，让着当把你了喇叭恰话月经，先去去了没当心，没干呢，俺那我没干呢，天这边俺那恰当牛的码头啊，两个人在吧，他把两个人在吧，他把没做的，让多你说两把的先比这边。 其实，俺呢，两个人都喜欢用的单米猪肉，喜欢单米猪肉，晒的两个人在我们这些，你就喜欢用米猪肉晒的菜。
The next point is getting an explanation of how one ought to get rid of one's excessive attachment to one's own position, one's own side. And here Master Aryadeva says, you're attached to your own side, and if you're attached to your own side and you don't like others' side, others' position, then you won't go to nirvana. Someone who behaves in a dualistic fashion like that won't achieve peace. And so then the commentary on this says that if you're a person who is excessively attached to their own position, that here one thinks that emptiness is that which eliminates samsara, so emptiness is good, I'm attached to that. And if you then say others are perverse, others are wrong, saying that, and you're someone who is excessively attached to your own position, and you develop anger towards others' position, then a person such as you, who have that sort of excessive attachment to your own side, anger towards the other, is you're somebody who is excessively attached to your own position of emptiness, And if you don't like others' positions, and out of that you have anger, then without getting rid of that attachment and that anger, attachment to your own side, anger towards the other side, there's no way that you can go, you can achieve liberation or nirvana. Langdor nisu temper shimpe chupe jisudu. Langdor nisu. Langdor nisu temper shimpe chupe jisudu.
Langdor nisu temper shimpe chupe langja da toja rang ane rangxin ji zhuo shimpe chupe rangxin chupe qisi du xiwa yong de dan min ju ro si temper shimpe ane yang de tok fu ma de xiwa dan min ju.
So as long as one behaves, one has that sort of engages in that strong attachment to things that are to be taken up and things that are to be abandoned as being real, one's own position and others' positions here illustrated, as long as you have that, then you'll never arrive at a state of peace.
Papa Gundin Genya Chadis, T. Chamsa Tona, Soba Dovakeva Shino.
So there's the example that's given in the commentary is there was an ascetic, and the ascetic was induced to take up the vows of a layman by the Arya Sangasena, and but that once he became a layman, whenever he saw a Brahmin, he wanted to kill the Brahmins.
That did it. That you were tabatin, tendo nyawa tambatela. Ani dushani, Bena Tabatobata, Koala, Magona Tabatom Minubata, Kuini Shidu Shiva, Tabata Beribata, Tomanin and Neluji Tambacha, Mayimbata. Shida division, but oh, Neluta to me, Tenachi Sosanam Jishako, they do you be nane. That Tambo de Carres and Bena Tabatop Lava, said Zimba.
So next comes an instruction on that one should strive for liberation. It's got multiple subdivisions here. I won't go through them. First of those is showing how if one makes effort at it, one can easily attain liberation.
Oh yeah, that did it. Kade, because a cheme yang da juji. Chebe yangse zhu de, Lenin Chamba zhu jida, Samdra mebe, Yangale, never told la Chishi me, say that dig Kanesudo, Sena, Kadi Yangala David, Dawa Tambani, Chawa Duja Kuduan, Yamar Shivi, and Dawa Tambani, and Dushido Kavicheri, and the Toba Minilas. Sibani Beba Meba Tolaba, Sibiku, Siba Koya Dewani, Beba Meba Tolave. Daja ani or Sibala Jugo Shena or the Dadela Gemele Gemigile Tamjala Gemigile Tamjala Chawa Cheba Meba Chawa Le Tamjala Chawa Cheba Meba Kondo Chibe Yangala Dewa Dushin Cheme Yangan Da Dushin Gawada Migivi Le Tamjala Chawa Cheba Meba, Kondo Chibe, Ranshi Chawa Cheba Meba, Kondo Chibeina, Yangala Dawa Dushin. Give me Chawa Nazo Chebala, Ani, Yasiba Dubdes, Yasik the Quad, Yasiba to the Quad, Kubijo Dubde, Segana, Cheme Yang, Dashu Chebe, Yasik to days.
So next comes, again, the explanation of how it is easy to attain liberation if one makes effort at it. And this is given in verse 186, where it says, we cannot attain the perfect happiness of nirvana because it is extremely difficult to do so, but we enter into samsara because it is easy to acquire without effort. And here actually, you could read it as that because it's very difficult to achieve the noble happiness of nirvana, the best happiness of nirvana, we can't do that, we can't obtain that. But existence, here samsara, we can achieve that easily. Therefore, we'll do that. We'll engage in that. We could translate it that way too. And so here it says that not acting brings about nirvana. Acting again brings worldly existence, samsara. Thus, it says without complication, but I think that you could translate that as without concern, without any worry, without any concern. Nirvana is easy to attain, but not the latter, meaning existence here. So here it says that understanding about not doing actions, whether they are virtuous or non-virtuous activities, brings about nirvana. Here, where it says understanding this, that with respect to all virtuous and non-virtuous karma, having understood them as being without an object, the object, that's the activity itself, or an agent. And if we interpret this as meaning that the agents and the actions themselves are devoid of any kind of intrinsic existence, then one will achieve nirvana. One can achieve nirvana. And on the other hand, by engaging in all of the various kinds of activities, karma, which gets us involved in activities of virtue and non-virtue, will be reborn, will produce again existence, that is rebirth within samsara. Therefore, one should give up all engaging in all kinds of activities, and without any kind of concern at all, one should attain nirvana. It's easy to attain nirvana if one does that without concern. No.
Oh yeah. Atena. There's coca water to Tena. Shawa Tamja Chapa Lodging, Samra Meba said it, and that the Gadamiki Gatam Chameba said, Tendam La Jaya Chedang. Yana Saja Gawada Miki Village Chapala Jana. Saja Gawada Miki Village Chawa Tamja La Chapa Lodging. And Samra Mebe. Yangala Deva Top Lala. Yana, ane kansore gawada miki beje, rashi yitoba kondu chiba le, samra meba, yangale dewa toblala, jushi kowi toblalas, jushi kowi dewa ni, dani dela to toba mimbe. Kawa ngatu nazo ji jimgoba tobi, ane tobe, yangale tendo nyewa bana ngatu ji, 아니 나도 나조지 토비 코비 텐드냐와 미리서 세야되라 아니 양아래 내가 토블라 지시민 세세.
So there's two ways we could read this section. Actually, it's a little bit hard to construe. We can interpret it sort of from the ultimate perspective, meaning that activities and agents don't exist by means of their own intrinsic nature. There's agents and activities are simply conventionally existent. They don't have ultimate existence in any way whatsoever. And so understanding that absence of intrinsic nature with respect to agents and oneself as the actor performing the activities, one without any effort at all or concern, can easily attain nirvana. That's one way to do it. Or one can read this as turning away from all kinds of activities and oneself being the agent in these activities. If we read that as referring to virtuous and non-virtuous karma, and say we turn away from those things, then without any concern we can easily attain nirvana. That's an alternative reading of the same passage. And here then, on the other hand, somebody who is striving to attain the happiness of samsara, they'll never be able to attain that easily. And because of that, those who are wise, without being tied up in those who are wise without being bound up with or focused on all kinds of various sorts of fatiguing activities, they without needing to do that, they strive they strive to attain nirvana, to achieve nirvana. And on the other hand, and for wise people, it's inappropriate for them to strive to achieve samsara, which entails engagement in all kinds of fatiguing activities.
Oh yeah, that bena ne me be top jubala. Ke mambo yegang. Ani ne me be top ani top juba medena ti gen tend menya shino sigina.
The analogy that's given for this is that there are many factors through which immunity to sickness can be acquired, but if one does not want that, meaning freedom from the sickness, then one will not seek them.
Oh yeah, that did 타바타바라 토마 코아리 쪼가 검거야지 아니 쪼가 마고나 타바테니 그로 미게바디 칸은 디조 예메다 텔라 시구 칼라 예세라 코알라 쪼위 아니 나와 집에 의지 매발라 아니 거의 동안 예와 시와기 아니 탈발라 그거 하면 더 얘기하지 연구 말해야 돼 말이라 칸은 디조 예메나 텔라 시구 칼라 예 란줌라지 세반에 되는 중앙이가 아세가 가대 된다고 차와지 안 미제배 냥알랜다와 주로세나 단지디 미자바다 동안라서 단제나 단제나 아니 가서 미자바다 동안 단제나 거의 차와 탐자 아니 거의 차와 탐자다 저에 타바 취비지도 코알라 깨버 쪼아집이 체르세 가사 간라 코완데라 쪼여바 민바 테라 아니 거의 동아 시와게 타바라 그와 아니 갈라 타바라 시와 갈라 예 어디 이 베라 베나 꼼베 도미 동아 메바라 아니 꼼베 동아 시와 집에 타 동아 나 전혀 메제바 신도
So next shows that if one doesn't cultivate within oneself, develop aversion or disgust towards samsara, one will not be able to achieve liberation. And it says that here in the verse, one who doesn't have disgust towards this, meaning to samsaric existence, how would they possibly have respect for achievement of peace? It's just like the case. It's more difficult for one to come out of one's own. It's much harder to come out of this existence, to develop a disgust and renunciation of samsaric existence, than it is to come out of one's own house. And so here someone might say, well, ultimately, if there's nothing to be done and no agent to do these activities, then one will achieve nirvana. If these things ultimately don't exist, then what's the point of impermanence and suffering, etc., having been taught in this treatise? Here, these things were taught, impermanence and suffering were taught in this text, in order to generate within the student, disciple, disgust towards samsara, so that they will strive to achieve the liberation, which is free from all of the activities of samsara. Someone who doesn't have disgust, revulsion towards this samsara, that person, how could they possibly have respect for and admiration, devotion, and the wish to achieve liberation, which is the pacification of all of the sufferings of samsara? It's like someone who is not suffering from the thirst, suffering from thirst. How would they develop interest in getting the method to pacify their thirst? That is, trying to get something to drink. They'll never give rise to that.
Oh yeah, that day, Lauren didn't get to the Yemisana Mabana, Tabatoni, Chishi, Mijiwe, said the Chiba in Barre.
Same thing as in the abbreviated Lamrim. It says that as long as one doesn't have disgust for samsara, one will never strive to achieve liberation.
아니 랑김 나지 시바니 데네 중화 차와가 세페나 랑기 김유부 추야 대라 차바 용서 제민이와 진도서 제민이와 시도 로 추와는데 시바디네 아는 내와 좋아야 토바 가와래 가와 임바데 가르스나 시바 So
the example, illustration of this is even if one has a poor house, it's very difficult to completely eliminate attachment to that. If one is unable to that, they won't give it up. And similarly, those of small intellect, of less intelligence, it's difficult for them to develop the wish to gain freedom from existence because they're bound by desire, by their attachment.
So
the example that's given here is where is that? 188, 187. Sorry. So it's like someone who's attached, the attachment to objects, so that kind of attachment to objects. The example that's given for that is someone who is bound for death. They're going to be executed immediately, but they still crave something to drink. We'll stop there for now.